and we are going to learn the 13 malachos of making cloth. We'll start from hagoizes. Hagoizes is setzemer, if someone shears the wool. Goizes means to shear. Under this category is also plucking feathers from a chicken or cutting hair. Hamalavnoi, bleaching it or laundering it, washing it in the river or in water. That would take away all the dirt. Sheep are not especially clean animals, and their wool is filthy until it's washed. But menaftzai is combing it out. It's actually called carding. It's two pieces of wood that have like these metal combs on the inside, and you rub the combs opposite against each other, and the wool in between gets stretched till it's very thin fibers. Vatsoiva is dyeing that, coloring it. First you would comb it out, and then you would color it because then the dye gets absorbed better. Vatsoiva is then the spinning it. Spinning it is because it's so thin, the fibers are so thin. If you twist it, it will turn into string, into thread. The way this was done in the olden days was with a spindle. A spindle was like a weight that you could just spin it like a dreidel in the air, and it would spin the cloth. This was done as actually a pasuk in Mishlei, in Eishes Chayil. That's how everyone knows it. Yadeh shilcha bakishar v'chapeh tamchu palach. Palach is the spindle, and the rest of the cloth was held around the kishar, which happens to be called the distaff. Distaff is just something to make sure that the wool doesn't get tangled while it's spinning. So you wrap it around this kishar, and the palach was the spinning, or the falach was spinning. Okay, v'hamesach. Once you have the thread, you have to set it up on the loom, because just having a spool of thread isn't going to make you cloth. It's kind of difficult to make unless you have a machine to do it. And they had machines, just not electric, but they had very efficient machines. I'll show you a picture of a simple one. This is just a simple loom. The cloth goes across. This cloth is called the warp. This yarn is called the warp. This cloth that's going here is called the woof, or the weft. And this is called the shuttle that goes back and forth. This is very important. This is the heddle. This is going to come next, and I'll show you how this works. So there's a bigger picture. Okay, so Mesach is setting up those strings, putting them back and forth. That's Mesach, setting up the loom. You have it over here, setting up the warp. But V'oiser shtei batinirim. Oiser shtei batinirim, it's machlekes what it is, but it has to do with the heddles. You're making two holes for the nirim. Nirim are the heddles. So we go back to our picture. Let's make it larger here. If you notice, there's a hole in the center of this spike, and then the side is empty. So the way it would work is that every other one would go through the center hole, and every even one, every odd one would go through the hole. Every even one, or it doesn't matter, the opposite, would go in this longer area. And that way, when you push down or pull up, you can make an opening of every other one. That way, you don't have to put the cloth under and over, under and over, and under and over. That would take forever. This, you can just put it through once by just raising up every odd one or every even one, and then you can go back and forth, up, down, and push it through opposite each time. Okay. That is the Oiser Shtei Batinirim, is making those holes. Now, the way it was done in the olden days, instead of having wood, they would have probably a string with a cloth on top, and they would have with a string with a little pole, and they would have two of them. Let's say they'd pull up the right one, the one in your right hand, and that would lift up the even ones. You lift up the left one, lift up the odd ones, or whatever. Those are the batinirim, would be the heddles, the strings that would be attached to the warp. Va'oirik shnei chutim is actually the weaving. Hapitzeya shnei chutim, I don't want to translate that now. It has to do with separating the ends, but it's a little complicated. It's a major machlekes. Hakoisher is tying knots. Matir is untying. Hatayfer shtei tfiris is to sew two stitches. That was done once the cloth was made. And Akirei almanas litfer shtei tfiris is tearing in order to resew. We'll learn about that in the Gemara, why they had to tear.